Welcome to the DeFi Standard. This is Patty XRP, and with me is,
Mickey B. Fresh.
and today we are going to be covering the State Connector System, which is a very integral part of the Flare network, utilizing cutting edge technology to basically track and be able to interact based on any kind of state changes for all the underlying blockchains to the Flare network. So to start off, that's XRP Ledger, Stellar, Litecoin, and Dogecoin. And Mickey, before we dive in here, I do want to touch on one paragraph from the Flare white paper, just kind of talking about general use case for this system. And from the white paper, they say one natural application for the Spark dependent applications is to enable trustless token representations of non Turing complete tokens. And that SDA is the F asset system. And they go on to say approximately 75% of the value that has emerged in public blockchain is in cryptocurrencies on non Turing complete blockchains. Spark enables the value represented by these tokens to be used on a scalable smart contract platform in a trustless manner. Furthermore, once that value is represented trustlessly on Flare, it can then potentially be propagated across other networks through interoperability networks such as Cosmos and or Polkadot, for example. And then obviously the first such representation they were working on was for XRP to be FXRP on the Flare network, and we'll see all four of those integrated blockchains having F assets once that goes live. And I'll pass it over to you, Mickey, for some
Sure.
opening thoughts. Yeah.
So one thing that we should know is what is the Flare Networks? Why is it named Flare Networks? And the reason why it's named Flare Networks, like a flare, it sends up a signal. That's what flares do. And this is what's taking place in the State Connector system. You have these nodes running in a unique node list on other blockchains, and they're signaling back the data from those networks to the Flare network. And they're able to do this in a trustless, decentralized way. And then the same thing goes for the price feeds. These signal providers are signaling back all the price feeds from the exchanges and secondary markets of the assets that are in the Flare time series oracle. So this is where we get the name Flare Network from. So I hope that makes sense to everyone, and it brings some clarity to why they named it Flare Network, because it's signaling back all this data. And right now we have two places it's signaling data back from: the actual blockchains, because it needs to digest all the data. So when I say digesting all the data, it's taking all the accounts, everything, the whole history of that blockchain, and signaling it back to Flare Network. And then the same goes to the signal providers for the price feeds. It's doing that in real time, continuously signaling back this data to the Flare Network. And that's why the Flare Network is a data provisioning network.
Yeah, and to add on to that, Mickey, so you guys can kind of think how you would mint an F asset. So we'll use XRP as an example. And in order to receive FXRP on the Flare network, you have to send your XRP to the listing of agent addresses that will be providing collateral for your FXRP position. And, how is the Flare network going to know that the agent's addresses received the appropriate amount of XRP on the XRP ledger? Well, that's where the state connector system comes in. It'll, basically let the Flare network know and its smart contracts that this action has taken place, this transaction has taken place on the underlying blockchain. And now the smart contracts can mint the FXRP on the Flare network and deliver that to the appropriate address. Based on whichever user was going through that process. So that's like a very pertinent thing that's being used here. But we'll go over into the DeFiStandard.com website and take a look at a blog for guidance on how all of this is going to work. Now, on our website, we can start with this first section, which has to do with digesting data through the state connector system. So, the Flare network is designed to securely observe and interpret changes to the state of any integrated blockchain determined by governance for F assets. And, like the four that we mentioned earlier, those are the first four integrated blockchains, and governance will be able to vote on more once the Flare network is live and, everybody has their Spark tokens delivered to them. So some interesting things about this is Basically, the Flare network does not require any trust except for to the validators of the integrated blockchains in order to digest the state changes on the underlying blockchains. So, what's happening here is the state connector system is tapping into the consensus of these other networks, which are already decentralized at this point, and allowing the Flare network to access that. So that's like a really big thing that as the, Flare network grows, so too will the consensus or the consensuses of other blockchains that it will be able to access. So Mickey, I'll pass it over to you for thoughts on that.
Sure, this is really important. So, one of the most difficult things in launching a blockchain is getting it to be decentralized with the validators and the nodes on the network. And one thing that Flare is able to do is bootstrap off these other blockchains decentralization. So, they're literally bootstrapping decentralization out the gate without using value. And most networks nowadays, when they launch, they have to use value to get the validators incentivized. And in the system that Flare created, you don't have to do that. They do earn little rewards for signaling that data back, but it's a way to bootstrap decentralization. So the two hardest things when spinning up a network are distributing the token, which has been taken care of by a large airdrop to an established community, and decentralizing the validators. And Flare has able to complete that with a revolutionary new way called the state connector system, which works with these underlying blockchains to digest the data and signal it back. So this network will never be called centralized because it's literally taking the decentralization of these other networks at launch.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the great things about the state connector system is that it doesn't require any changes on any of the underlying blockchains. They don't have to do anything to accommodate this, as, the Flare network's going to be bootstrapping off their consensus protocols already and their whole validator ecosystems. So, whether it's like miners on Litecoin or maybe Bitcoin in the future, or validators that are listed on like the XRP ledger UNL. Obviously we're gonna have different kind of terminology between, depending on if it's proof of work, proof of stake, Byzantine agreement, but that's how it will be happening. And to go more into the design, we'll kind of touch on what this threat model for the state connector system is to start with. So basically, the threat model is crucial to maintaining the accurate digesting of integrated blockchain state changes. This design requires attackers to alter the view of integrated blockchains through their own Flare network validator and a quorum of other Flare network validators. So in order to, basically falsify data coming from another blockchain to the Flare network smart contracts, that, any attackers are going to have to be present on the underlying blockchains. And then they're also going to have to be present as a validator on the Flare network. And they're going to have to basically rig the consensuses of both. So you can see how that adds layers of difficulty to doing that, which, I think provide some robustness to the security of the system. And then, how is all this going to work? So we'll go down to this picture here to kind of go through this. And thank you, Cynthia, for putting this together. It's very nice. But basically, we're going to have the Flare network, and it's connected to all these different blockchains here. And you're going to have, which, these cell towers basically represent validators on each of these blockchains. And they'll be receiving and observing the state changes that occur on all the integrated blockchains. But validators on the Flare network will also be able to act as, validators on each of these underlying networks, and they'll be able to compete to provide state changes back to the Flare network. And the first criteria is that enough of the validators on the Flare network have this data or this state change available to them to apply to their own ordering and validity of transactions that they will be taking through there for consensus. And the next part, after enough of the Flare network validators have received what they will call like a data availability proof, is to essentially, accept these changes and send them out through each validator's quorum. and all the intersections that happen with federated Byzantine agreement for the entire network to reach consensus. So this is going to allow the Flare network to, have its smart contracts conduct actions depending on what happens on other blockchains, which is a really powerful use case. And Mickey, I'll turn it over to you for some more thoughts there.
Sure. So just looking at the dynamic of the Flare network, you could see that Flare network itself is attaching itself to the rest of the ecosystem. It's not creating this siloed blockchain that it wants everyone to come onto. It's literally attaching itself to these other blockchains without making any changes to them, without asking permission. It could attach to the Stellar network. It doesn't have to ask JED permission for that. It just does that as long as the validators, which are on a permissionless network anyway, also then operate on Flare. So this is just a start, these 4 blockchains. And then on top of that, you have these signal providers, which are oracles. That's basically what they are. They exist independently of different blockchains. So you're creating this dynamic ecosystem around the Flare network that attaches it to the rest of the blockchain ecosystem and cryptos out there and the exchanges with the price feeds. So I think it's just really powerful of what could be developed in the future on this by bringing accurate data back to the Flare network. This will attract more application developers to develop on the Flare network because you have your price feeds there. You have Litecoin's data right there. You have all the XRP ledger data. So you can create even new, exciting applications in the future with this state connector system. And this is what they've been working on for 3 to 4 years. It's not just the Spark token airdrop to give you free tokens. They've been building this cutting edge technology. And this breakthrough consensus works with the state connector system, and it works with the FTSO, which provides you rewards for able to delegate your votes. So it's all new technologies going on here. So this is why this is a next generation blockchain network. And I consider it a 4th generation because it is an advancement from Cardano and Hedera Hashgraph. It's the next generation, really, by integrating data.
Absolutely. And, something else I think is important to note. So, like with Flare's consensus protocol being based on federated Byzantine agreement, that allows all the underlying nodes and validators to choose whether, they're accepting this data that's coming from these integrated blockchains. So they're not forced into accepting anything. But obviously, all the nodes and validators will have to reach consensus of 80% agreement or more for it to be finalized on the ledger and then move forward from there. So I think that's another important thing to add in, that none of these nodes on the Flare network are going to be, forced to accept anything. It'll still fall under like the same consensus rules and the algorithm that underpins the network. And then additionally, like we were saying earlier, how the Flare network can essentially, once these F assets are brought on, now propagate them onto some other network. I really think that brings about some very interesting use cases for interoperability and kind of leans into the fact that, not every smart contract network is going to be, good at the same things as another one. So the more that we can enable them to connect with each other, I think, the better the market will be at utilizing each of these blockchains for, what they are best at doing. And I would also add that, this provides a very unique opportunity for the Flare network to basically be like a hub for connecting, non-smart contract networks to, different DeFi ecosystems that allow you to utilize your value in, dApps essentially. And then moving down here, we'll kind of just go over the advantages of the state connector system. These are directly pulled from Flare Network documentation on their website, flare.xyz. And so the Flare team says that the advantages include transaction validity references back to an underlying chain's genesis block. So that's where it started at, so that it can, track all the way back to there. The safety depends on an underlying chain's validators. So, ideally, when we're bringing new F assets into the system, we would like those underlying blockchains to already be decentralized. So that's that bootstrapping of security off the underlying networks. And then additionally, no cooperation needed from underlying chains validators. It can read the state of any blockchain, And then additionally, they say no encoding of the current validators in control of an underlying chain to a smart contract on Flare. So it still has to go through like the Flare network validator ecosystem. It's not directly from the validators on these underlying chains. They'll have constant sized proofs, so they're not going to differ in size. And then additionally, every Flare validator, like we were just saying, independently verifies an underlying chain state. So, they're not just relying on some node or validator out there to post it and then accept it. They'll still go through that same process.
Exactly. So this is a more decentralized version of basically what Corda Settler was trying to do. Corda Settler was just a verification system that verifies transactions over the XRP ledger. But really, what Flare's doing, it's literally doing what Corda Settler does in a more decentralized way with even more capabilities. So I think it's just really powerful what's developed here. And I know there's been a lot of talk of Corda Settler, but really that doesn't settle anything. It just verifies transactions on other networks. And it does it in a centralized way with a centralized oracle. The Flare network does it in a very decentralized way, and it's built into the Flare's public network. So I think that's powerful. And I do encourage everyone to check out Patty's blog that he wrote at the DeFi Standard if you want more information in this. And it will be linked in the description below.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And just before we finish up here, the last part is basically parties that operate as validators on the Flare network, and then additionally as miners on any proof of work networks. We'll have to see as proof of stake networks get integrated if all of the entities you can stake with are able to participate in this process or just certain ones. I will say for like the XRP ledger where they have a unique node listing, you will have to be listed on the UNL on the XRP ledger as well as on the Flares UNL in order to participate in earning rewards from the state connector system. And basically, what's happening here is you have these validators that are operating on Flare and then also the underlying networks, either as miners or validators, and they will be competing to provide state changes to the Flare network. In the quickest manner possible. So that's kind of what was included earlier about providing claim avail or data availability proofs, and then also having the transaction be verified and proved, so that the Flare network can move on and take actions based off that. So this will be conducted via something called a ground truth listing of validators, and that will be published weekly. So anybody that is on that list will be able to participate in the state connector system rewards. And it looks like some of the Spark inflationary rewards will be diverted to the entities participating in this so that, they can get this decentralized in a good enough manner to, so everybody can trust that this information and the state changes coming from the underlying blockchains are accurate and correct.
Yeah, I think this is an important design decision on Flare's part. And it shows that instead of entities putting up stake and then getting slashed for providing bad info or having bad behavior, with Flare, that's how Chainlink works. You put up stake and you get just slashed if you do bad things. Where Flare Network, you get rewarded if you continue to provide the fastest, most accurate data. And that's important. They don't have to put up any stake. So there's no risks of slashing. And that's a problem with proof of stake with a lot of slashing networks. If they don't provide accurate data, you slash you. With Flare, the design is so much better because you're not using value to secure something. You're just rewarding with value for good behavior. I think that's a powerful difference that we're going to see in the future. As we get past this proof of work and we'll focus on energy and green energy, the next turn will be focusing on, well, what are the flaws of proof of stake? And even with oracles, putting up stake is not an ideal solution. Do internet service providers put up stake to route your emails around? No. So this is something in the future I think is going to be a big thing. And Flare is ahead of the game with their design, with the state connector system and the way it signals back data feeds by sending rewards without putting up stake or value.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all I have for this, Mickey, and we can wrap up here. So Just a reminder, this is at the DeFiStandard.com. If you want to read about it more, we have links to the official documentation from Flare Network as well that you can check out. But we are the DeFi Standard. I'm Patty XRP, and with me was,
Mickey B Fresh.
and we are out. See you guys.